What's going on, folks? Welcome to another episode of the Adventure One podcast. Several times I have mentioned EDC. That means everyday carry. It is definitely not my term. I've heard this term EDC for well over a decade in the gun industry. And it's becoming more and more common for non-gun type people to refer to everyday carry, meaning their phone, wallet, watch, and anything else they tend to cram in their pockets on a regular basis. It is different for everybody, but most people end up with a core set of EDC tools. Even if you don't think consciously about it, you end up carrying the same items around with you pretty regularly. Think about your wife or your girlfriend's handbag. There are several items in there that are used regularly throughout the day. There are some just-in-case type items. And of course, there's some trivial bullshit that is just along for the ride. For guys, it really isn't all that different, other than that we often lack the actual bag and resort to our pockets, forcing us to trim things down a bit. For the average guy who isn't a soy boy beta male, I think a good EDC typically contains a pocket knife, a watch, a smartphone, a keychain, a wallet, and a pistol if you are licensed to carry. I recommend adding a flashlight to the mix if you can. I'm actually pretty bad about this myself. I always have one in the truck, but rarely do I actually have one on my body. That's something I need to get better about. I also recommend keeping a small USB drive on your keychain. These days, it's always handy to have more ways to back up files or transport them. I may do a whole other episode about good everyday carry items, but today we're going to talk about an interesting chemical called tritium and its role in everyday carry. I've started many episodes with some statement along the lines of, I'm not an expert in this subject, but I know more than the average bear and I'm just trying to pass along what I know. This time, it's a little bit different. I actually would consider myself to be extremely knowledgeable in the subject of tritium application in everyday carry products. I used to work for one of the largest tritium installers in the United States. I didn't deal with tritium from a scientist point of view, as much as from a sales and marketing perspective, but it forced me to do a lot of my own research and learn a lot about it and how it's commercially viable and what it really means and where it's practical. So from a purely pragmatic standpoint, what is tritium? A tritium vial is a small capsule containing a chemical that glows in the dark for years. In fact, it doesn't just glow in the dark, it always glows. You just only observe it glowing when there's not much surrounding light. It never needs to be exposed to light or recharged in order to glow. While this seems like a fairly insignificant detail, it's actually very important to the practical application of tritium lamps. The ability to have a small dot that always glows bright is fun and interesting, but it also has some pretty amazing applications in safety and personal protection, or empowering the use of any device that you may need to see or find in the dark. Some of the most common uses of tritium are in emergency exit signs. Tritium provides a low, even glow so that the sign can remain illuminated even when the power goes out, or when the sign is wet or cold, or in any other condition that may harm a battery-operated system. United States Army soldiers are issued navigational compasses that contain tritium. Tritium lamps on the needle and on the face of the compass allow soldiers to see what direction they're headed without having to turn on a light to see the face of the compass. There are many analog watches that use the same principle, embedding tritium gas lamps in the hands and on the face of the watch. This was first used by aviators, divers, and submariners who often have to operate in total darkness and still maintain a very accurate sense of time to monitor critical resources like fuel or oxygen. These watches are still not very mainstream, but have become more popular with pilots, soldiers, contractors, and gadget guys like myself. There are many times where this is a cool and convenient feature, but there are many times where this can save lives or totally change the level of stealth in an operation. Having tiny glowing dots that are just bright enough to see to read the compass, but not bright enough to give off any notable light signature, can be a big difference. If soldiers are sitting in the dark in a vehicle, or at a lookout post, glancing at a watch to check the time becomes a very normal thing instead of being the guy who turns on a flashlight that either gives away your position or forces everyone else's eyes to have to readjust to the complete darkness. Similarly, there are many operations where soldiers are issued night vision observational devices, or NODs. We often refer to them as night vision goggles, but really a PVS-14 doesn't look like a pair of goggles at all. These devices being able to see in the dark means they are incredibly sensitive to any and all light. Switching on a bright light can be painfully bright or even damaging to anyone wearing NODs. However, a tiny glowing dot on a watch or compass won't have any harmful effects and will still show up clear as day. That should give you a good general feel for how tritium is used in some practical applications. Now let's get a bit nerdy and take a look at the science of it. Tritium is a radioactive isotope of hydrogen. You may remember from high school chemistry that an isotope is basically a different version of an element. Every atom has a nucleus that consists of protons and neutrons, with a cloud of electrons that orbit around it. In most normal atoms, the number of protons and neutrons in the nucleus is generally the same, making it stable. An isotope has an unbalanced or irregular combination of neutrons and protons. Let's use a cheesy metaphor to think of this. Think of a cheeseburger. Not a good one with all the fixins, just a plain Jane cheeseburger with meat and cheese on a bun. If a standard cheeseburger has one patty and one slice of cheese, then an isotope would be a burger with one patty and two slices of cheese, or a burger with two or three patties and one slice of cheese. Before I make you too hungry, let's get back to the science. A hydrogen atom has one proton in the nucleus and one electron in orbit. If it had two protons, it would be some version of helium. That one proton is important for it identifies the core of what an atom is and what it does. However, if we manipulate the number of neutrons, this is how we create or identify different isotopes. As long as there's just one proton, it's just a different type of hydrogen. A hydrogen atom with one proton and one electron is called protium. This is the most common and most stable form of hydrogen. Most hydrogen floating around in the atmosphere is protium. If we were to beef up the hydrogen atom by adding a neutron, so it now has one proton attached to one neutron with one electron spinning around it, this is called deuterium. Deuterium is a fairly stable version of hydrogen. It can be manufactured and stored, but ultimately it wants to seek equilibrium and shed the unnecessary weight to become regular protium. Generally, deuterium will remain as is until a catalyst or external energy of some type is applied, which can prompt it to break down into its simpler form, protium. Tritium is the third isotope of hydrogen, which is why you often see it noted as H3. It has one proton and two neutrons, with a single electron orbiting around it. Compared to regular protium, this is a heavy, unstable fat guy. Probably the guy who ate all those cheeseburgers from my earlier analogy. Like a big fat guy, tritium is unstable and uncomfortable in the world of slimmer and more stable hydrogen isotopes. Tritium does naturally occur, but typically as a byproduct of other powerful reactions, like lightning strikes and solar radiation. Tritium is still a gas, so it is floating around freely in the atmosphere. It would be hard to find and nearly impossible to capture, so commercial forms of tritium are made in a lab, and more commonly made as a byproduct of nuclear reactors. Just like we discussed with deuterium, tritium will tend to break down into a simpler and more natural form. It will shed some weight, lose a neutron and turn into deuterium, or break up and pick up a proton and become an isotope of hydrogen. That is a good basic summary of what tritium actually is, but why the hell does it glow? I mean, that everlasting green glow is what makes it cool after all, right? The short answer is this breakdown process of tritium to deuterium and deuterium to protium gives off energy. But that's not actually the energy that we're seeing. That isn't a very accurate answer to describing the glow. A gas tritium lamp is a small, sealed glass vial that contains tritium at a safe pressure level. The pressure level is important because the higher the pressure, the more tritium you can cram into a small space, creating a brighter glow. Obviously, you don't want to have a pressure level that could crack the glass, so the pressure is monitored very precisely. This glass vial doesn't just contain tritium, though. You probably already figured out that even if it starts as tritium, it also contains some deuterium, some protium, some hydrogen, and likely some free unassociated neutrons. You're correct. However, none of those things actually glow. They're all clear to the human eye. The vial also contains a chemical that creates a light reaction. Remember when you were a little kid and you had those glow-in-the-dark sticky stars on your bedroom ceiling? Well, I did at least. There are several chemicals in those sticky stars that can be exposed to light energy and will absorb the light energy for a brief amount of time and then gradually release it. That is what those sticky stars were doing. The most common chemical that does this naturally is phosphorus, which glows green. This can be seen in bioluminescent plankton that glows green in the surf at certain times of the year. I've even seen natural phosphorus in caves that continue to glow green for a few seconds after you put your headlamp right against the rock. The combination of a radioactive decaying isotope like tritium and a phosphor coating on the inside of the glass is called radioluminescence. There are other chemicals with similar reactions in different colors, but they all work through radioluminescence. Phosphorus is used in most tritium lamps because it is naturally occurring, fairly common, and pretty bright. Additionally, the human eye can actually detect the color green better than most other colors. I may do a whole episode about that someday. So ultimately, what we refer to commonly as a tritium vial is more accurately called a tritium phosphor lamp. As tritium breaks down into deuterium and helium, it gives off energy. This energy excites the phosphorus, causing it to glow. Then eventually, some of that deuterium breaks down into protium, again exciting the phosphorus and keeping it glowing. This breakdown is a slow, gradual, controlled reaction, meaning that it is always happening inside the vial, not in an erratic way, but as a gradual process, meaning the tritium lamp glows evenly and constantly. This process is called beta decay. In this podcast, I'm just providing the basic overview of the subject to explain the usefulness of tritium lamps, but if you want to learn more on the subject, there's a lot of great information written on the topic of beta decay. Thanks for hanging in there for all the science stuff. This makes you a lot smarter than the 7% of Americans who think that chocolate milk comes from brown cows. This is not really a science channel, but I think that knowing how something works always provides a better basis for understanding how something can be used pragmatically. Tritium and deuterium have a half-life of 12.3 years. This means that after 12 years, half of the material will have broken down. In the tritium phosphor lamp, this directly relates to brightness. After 12 years, the lamp will be about half as bright as when it was first manufactured. For most applications, this means that the practical lifespan of tritium gas lamps is about 20 years. After 2 decades, there will still be a faint glow, but not enough for any useful visual application. Now let's get to my very favorite application of tritium phosphor lamps. Handgun night sights. If you've purchased a high-end handgun or some special edition of a handgun, there's a chance it came with tritium night sights on it. But most often, this is an aftermarket add-on. Tritium vials replace the painted white dots on your handgun sights. In daylight, each tritium lamp insert still looks like a white dot, but with a little bit of shine to it because it's made out of glass. In the dark, you will clearly see 3 glowing green dots. This allows you to see your sights in low light and even in complete darkness. Personally, I think any handgun that is assigned to a defensive role should have some form of night sights. Most duty guns carried by police departments are night sight equipped, and for good reason. A high percentage of crimes, including assaults and home invasions, happen at night. If the reason you carry a pistol or keep one in your home is to protect yourself from these instances, you need to be able to see your sights if that moment ever arises. There are several technologies used to create bright handgun sights. The current trend is putting a compact red dot sight like a Trijicon RMR on the slide of your pistol. This was controversial at first, but is now becoming mainstream. In my opinion, I think it's great for competitive shooting or general range use, but it adds bulk to the gun, and it makes your sighting system dependent on a glass lens that can easily be cracked and batteries that can easily die. I have a setup like this, and it's really nice, but it's not my go-to home defense or my EDC gun. Honestly, it's more of a range toy. I love it, but it's just not practical, and I can't trust my life on it. There are also fiber optic pistol sights. Again, these are great for hunting or competition. They're really bright in the daylight, and they don't need any batteries. They're still fragile. Spaghetti-thin strands of glass or polystyrene certainly are not battle tough. Fiber optics are great at picking up ambient light and channeling it into a bright glowing dot. But ultimately, they do not do anything for you if there's not enough ambient light. Thus, they are not night sights. There are also some cool hybrid technologies out there that combine a fiber optic with a tritium vial. These are made by TrueGlow, HiViz, and now Trijicon. Some of these solutions are better than others. I have TrueGlow TFX Pro sights on a couple of my pistols, and I like them a lot. These hybrid technologies are all about compromise, combining a good daylight sight with a good night sight. All of them work, but tend to compromise in different ways. And rarely are they actually the best of both worlds. Usually it's somewhere in between. For me, the most important thing is durability and reliability. If I have a pistol that I'm going to trust my life to, the sights need to be dependable. This is why I think the best option for everyday carry or for home defense is some form of a tritium-based sight. There are never any batteries to change, and there's not a large lens to break or get caught on something. One piece of advice: if you don't have the proper tools to install tritium night sights yourself, go to someone who does. More sights are critically damaged in improper installation than in actual use. Remember, the goal is dependability. Don't hack it up. So finally, this gets us back to the topic of everyday carry. As you know, I like to change things up a lot, but currently my most consistent carry gun is a Sig Sauer P365 9mm with Sig X-ray night sights. These sights are not actually made by Sig, but I don't think I'm legally allowed to tell you any more about that. I will let you look at the major players in that industry and connect the dots for yourself. In addition to the sights on my 9mm pistol, I often carry around 15 other tritium vials as a part of my daily EDC. 14 of those are in the face of my watch. There's a tritium vial on the minute hand and one on the hour hand. They are different sizes so you can tell the shorthand from the longhand. There is also a very small tritium lamp next to each number on the face. Some watch faces only have lamps at the 3, 6, 9, and 12 o'clock positions. But I like that this watch has a lamp at every position, so it feels similar to just reading a normal watch. No filling in the gaps, no thinking about it. I also like that the lamp at the 12 o'clock position on this watch is orange when all the rest are green. The orange lamp definitely is not as bright, but it will allow you to properly orient the watch. If there was no definitive way to orient the watch to the 12 o'clock position, you may be able to develop a good feel for reading it correctly, but you would never know for sure. Having one lamp that is a different color is very helpful. I can even take the watch off and put it back on in complete darkness and know with 100% certainty that I did not put it on upside down. While tritium lamps are often found in really expensive collectible watches, this is a much cheaper option, under $300. I picked out this Smith & Wesson Aviator because it looks nice and it's stainless steel, so it's very tough and I don't have to baby it. It is also one of the most affordable options with a full tritium face. If you want to learn more about this watch, I have an old video on the Adventure One YouTube channel talking all about it. The last tritium vial that I carry around is actually the largest one. On my keychain, I have a tritium lamp on a keyring. It is encased in glass with stainless steel end caps to protect it. If you have ever dropped your keys in the dark, you can imagine how helpful this is. As long as they're not buried under anything, I have a glowing green dot telling me exactly where my keys are. It is interesting, when I ordered this product, they were not available for commercial sale in the United States. Tritium is not allowed to be installed or sold in any novelty products. There is an application process for every new type of tritium product, and it currently has to have a security or safety application in order to pass this application process. When I ordered this keychain, I had to order it from the UK, where a keychain indicator lamp was already approved as a safety-related item, which actually makes a lot of sense if you're a security guard. It's important to be able to find your keys in the dark. When I ordered mine from the UK, I had to wait 2 months for it to clear customs, and I paid a lot more for shipping. Fortunately, there is now a new company called Glow Rhino that is making these in the United States. I guess they're really good at the licensing side of things because they also have other items like a miniature pry bar and a knife with tritium inserts on the side plates. It's exciting to see that more and more cool, glowing, everyday carry products are becoming available in the United States. Tritium-based products are heavily regulated. You can't just go out and buy up a bunch of tritium and start putting it in things. You can't even buy up pre-made tritium lamps and attach them to other things without a special license. Because tritium is radioactive, it is regulated by the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Other countries have similar regulatory agencies. Some countries like Germany strictly monitor the amount of radiation in each vial, but in most cases, it's not the level of radiation that is actually the concern. Tritium radiation is non-ionizing beta decay, which essentially means that it does not pass through things very easily. You don't need a lead blanket to protect yourself from the radiation of tritium. In most applications, tritium radiation doesn't even have the energy to pass into your skin, much less cause any real harm. Decades ago, radium was used to paint the hands of watches and clocks. Radium gave off a completely different type of radiation that can be very harmful. By comparison, tritium is extremely safe. But there are 2 ways that tritium can be really harmful, and that's why it's heavily regulated. Tritium is a version of hydrogen, so it can generally bond with anything that hydrogen can bond with. This obviously is not a problem when tritium gas is stored safely in a glass vial. But if a large amount of tritium was combined with a large amount of oxygen, it can form radioactive heavy water instead of just normal H2O. This heavy water is used in scientific and medical applications, but only in highly controlled situations. Once tritium is made into heavy water, there is no easy way to filter it back out. It is bonded on the molecular level. Tritium beta radiation lacks the energy to easily penetrate through cells, but water can easily pass through cells by osmosis. Unintentionally having radioactive water in your cells is certainly not a good thing. Ultimately, this is not something that most people have to worry about. This is just why facilities that install tritium and labs that work with heavy water are highly regulated and actively monitored. In all reality, tritium products are very safe, but no one wants that tritium getting out in a way that is uncontrolled. The other danger of tritium is the real reason it is monitored by the United States government. If you have ever read The Sum of All Fears by Tom Clancy, you probably already know this. Ultimately, tritium and deuterium can be used to amplify the effects of an atomic weapon. Ultimately, this is the difference between a regular atomic bomb, like what was used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and an H-bomb, a thermonuclear hydrogen weapon. Obviously, this causes no concern with having tritium night sights on your Glock, or having tritium vials in your Rolex, or on your Keyring Navigational Compass, or on your keychain. But it may now make sense why the US government would want to keep an eye on any facility who is buying, selling, or otherwise working with massive amounts of tritium. I hope you found this episode educational, interesting, and entertaining. Go take a look at some of the cool glow-in-the-dark tritium gadgets like watches, keychains, and night sights and see if they make sense in your everyday carry system or the everyday carry system of someone you know. Also, most of these items are inherently high quality because they're made in Switzerland, Israel, or the United States, so they can make great gifts. Thanks for listening to this podcast. Make sure to subscribe to Adventure One on YouTube and follow me on Instagram. There's always more cool content in the works. Until next time, stay safe, be free, and never stop seeking adventure.